Chapter 25 The Hyde. Tyler was in the midst of getting ready for his shift at the Weathervane Café when his phone buzzed with a FaceTime call from Wednesday. "Hey, Wednesday," Tyler greeted, adjusting his uniform. "Hey, Tyler," Wednesday replied from beneath the gazebo at the Adams Mansion in New Jersey. "Adele is stuck in Washington." Tyler raised an eyebrow. "Adele stuck in Washington?" "Yeah," Wednesday confirmed. "One of her cases is running into a snag. Her director is refusing to hand over key information about Miss Thornhill until the case is resolved." "Let me get this straight," Tyler said, still processing. "Adele represents outcasts?" "She does, but not exclusively," Wednesday explained. "She's pretty well known for defending outcasts, but she also takes on cases that most lawyers wouldn't dare touch. Regular cases, the kind that are high risk but need to be handled." "Wait," Tyler asked, still curious. "So, there's an outcast court and a regular court. What happens if an outcast gets tried in a regular court?" "Well," Wednesday continued, "if an outcast is tried in a regular court, the jury is doubled, 12 normies and 12 outcasts. The case is then scrutinized extra carefully to ensure no bias or discrimination against us, at least according to Adele." Tyler nodded, taking it in. "Is Adele the only one in your family working in the government?" "Not sure," Wednesday said with a slight shrug. "I think one of my cousins in Europe might have a role in Parliament, but I'm not sure which one. Maybe Judah. But that's besides the point." She paused. "By the way, Miss Thornhill hasn't shown up, has she?" "Nope," Tyler answered, trying to reassure her. "Dad said she probably took a different job for the summer, maybe something like summer camp or whatever." Wednesday's eyes twinkled as she recalled a memory. "I was in summer camp once." Tyler smirked. "Let me guess, you burned it down?" "Just the stage," Wednesday said nonchalantly. "And roasted a few camp counselors. We were doing a reenactment of the first Thanksgiving dinner." Tyler blinked, confused. "A Thanksgiving reenactment, in summer?" "Exactly," Wednesday replied, her tone dry. "The purpose was to teach the kids about subjugation, just like the original colonizers did to the Native Americans." "Should I ask how you managed to burn the stage?" Tyler said, now genuinely curious. "I went off script and had the Native Americans attack," Wednesday said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Those colonizers and counselors deserved it." Tyler laughed, shaking his head. "Well, I gotta get to work. I'll call you tonight." "All right," Wednesday said, before hanging up. Tyler finished locking up the Weathervane Café for the night, the last remnants of evening light fading into the cool night air. He pulled his jacket tighter around him, ready to head home after a long day. But as he turned to leave, a car screeched to a halt behind him. Before he could react, two figures emerged from the shadows, moving swiftly toward him. Tyler froze, instinctively sensing something was off. "Going somewhere?" a gruff voice asked, as one of the men stepped closer. Tyler took a step back, but the other man was already at his side, blocking his escape. His heart raced as he realized he was trapped. "Let me go," Tyler said, his voice steady but filled with tension. "You don't have a choice," the man replied, his tone cold and unyielding. From the car, Miss Thornhill stepped out, a calm smile playing on her lips. "Tyler, you've been a bit too curious lately," she said, her voice smooth but laced with something darker. "It's time you came with us." Tyler's eyes darted between the two men and Miss Thornhill, his mind racing for an escape. But before he could make a move, the first thug grabbed his arm, holding him tightly. "You're not going anywhere," he muttered. Tyler struggled, but it was no use. The second man stepped in, securing him with ease. Miss Thornhill stepped forward, her smile never wavering. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. You'll come with us quietly, or we'll make you." Tyler's pulse quickened. He tried to stay calm, but the reality of the situation hit him. Miss Thornhill's intentions were clear, he wasn't going to be free until she got what she wanted. With a gentle push, the thugs guided him toward the car, and Miss Thornhill followed close behind. "It's not personal," she said softly, as if trying to ease his tension. "But this is something that needs to be done." Tyler didn't answer. His mind raced, trying to think of any way out, but all he could do was follow as they led him toward the waiting vehicle, the sound of the car's door slamming shut behind him. Tyler felt the cold metal of chains around his wrists, his head covered by a bag. A familiar voice broke the silence, unmistakable and chilling. "Are you sure he's an outcast?" "He looks like a normal kid," a man's voice questioned. "He is an outcast," Miss Thornhill replied confidently. "His mother was one, too. Trust me, he's just like all the other students at that school, no different." A car engine revved, and Tyler heard it drive away. Miss Thornhill pulled the bag from his head and flashed him a smile. "You know, Tyler, I had plans before I came here. But I didn't expect to find you with Wednesday. You two are the missing pieces of my scheme. You've really upset me, turning my house into a private movie theater and getaway." "Your house?" Tyler asked, surprised. "Yes, my house," Miss Thornhill said, a smirk forming. "Originally, I was going to earn your trust, but then you had to go and listen to Adele. She wasn't part of my plan, too. I didn't expect her to be involved. She's been a thorn on my side, letting her cousin walk all over me. Did you know Wednesday destroyed my prized nightshade plant? Thankfully, Adele replaced it, getting her off the hook. Until that insolent brat killed it again. Anyway, I was going to tell you about your mother." Miss Thornhill paused, watching Tyler's expression carefully. "You already know your mother was an outcast, don't you?" "Guess I shouldn't be surprised," she said with a small laugh. "I thought I could earn your trust, but you already knew. Well, no matter. You probably don't need me to explain what I'm going to do next." She held up a syringe filled with a glowing blue liquid. "You're not going to get away with this," Tyler said, defiant. "Oh, but we are," Miss Thornhill said with confidence. "If you knew your mother, you'd understand why we're doing this. It's part of something much bigger." Tyler gasped as she injected him with the substance. "What are you planning?" Tyler asked, panic creeping into his voice. She didn't respond right away. "What my family has been planning for years, the removal of your kind. I thought I might take my time, but after watching you for a few days, I realized it could be too risky. You know, Wednesday keeps such a close eye on you. For someone who doesn't care about much, she certainly seems to care about you. Now I understand, she knows you're an outcast, too. Why else would a family of outcasts invite a regular boy to one of their private estates?" Tyler screamed in pain, but Miss Thornhill's eyes were drawn to the pendant around his neck. "That's a nice pendant. Expensive looking. Did Wednesday give that to you? I wonder how she'd feel if you lost it." She reached to remove it, but as her hand touched the necklace, it burned her palm, leaving behind a mysterious symbol. "That witch!" Miss Thornhill cursed, startled by the sudden pain. Tyler was in agony from the injection, but suddenly, his thoughts drifted to Wednesday. He could almost feel her presence, the softness of her skin, the warmth of her lips, the feel of her braided hair. The memory eased his pain, but before he knew it, his body began to change. His clothes ripped as his form shifted into something monstrous, an animalistic roar echoing through the woods of Nevermore. Miss Thornhill's pain subsided as Tyler's phone began to ring in her pocket. Tyler, now returning to his human form, grabbed the phone with shaking hands and answered it. "Don't let her know," Miss Thornhill ordered harshly. For reasons he couldn't explain, Tyler declined Wednesday's FaceTime call. Instead, he called her back with a regular phone call. "Hello, Cockroach," he said with a sly grin. Wednesday, confused by the nickname, responded, "What took you so long?" "I'm driving. Can't chat face-to-face right now." "I'll call you when I get home," Tyler replied, his tone light-hearted but slightly strained. "Why are you breathing so heavily?" Wednesday asked, sensing something was off. Tyler struggled to keep his breathing steady. "It's just the phone, too close to my face," he explained with a smile. I just had a vision of you turning into the Hyde, Wednesday said bluntly. Is that so? Tyler replied with a playful tone. Well, I'm perfectly fine, cockroach. I'll call you later when I get home. We can spend the whole night together. Wednesday's suspicion grew. I have to go, she said quickly, before hanging up. Tyler looked at Miss Thornhill, who smiled, believing she had successfully triggered the Hyde within him. But suddenly, Tyler shook his head and shouted, "What did you do to me?" Miss Thornhill's voice became cold and commanding. You will not tell anyone what happened. You will do exactly as I say. Yes, master, Tyler said mockingly, but then quickly added, go to hell. Miss Thornhill paused, realizing something. The behavior she was seeing in Tyler felt like two completely different personalities. It was as though she was dealing with two separate people. As Wednesday entered the Weathervane Café, she immediately spotted Tyler behind the counter, his eyes lighting up at the sight of her. Despite her usual stoic demeanor, she couldn't help but notice a flicker of something different in his expression, something that sent a chill down her spine. Hey, you, Tyler greeted, flashing a warm smile, clearly happy to see her. Wednesday walked up to the counter, her sharp eyes scanning his every movement. She wasn't convinced everything was fine. The events of the previous night still nagged at her, especially the fact that he had been so distant, not picking up her call, and then his odd behavior. You're not wearing the necklace I gave you, Wednesday remarked, her voice laced with suspicion. You never take it off. What happened? Tyler froze, caught off guard. His fingers instinctively brushed his neck, but the necklace wasn't there. For a split second, his mind flashed to the memory of Miss Thornhill's cruel grip on him and the pain he had felt, and before he could process it, the Hyde's voice crept in. It broke, the Hyde interjected smoothly, with a sly grin. It's in my room. If you want, we can go to my house later, and I'll show you. Wednesday didn't blink, her eyes narrowing slightly. She could tell something was off, but she said nothing, her gaze unwavering. Yes, let's do that, she said, her voice calm but firm. Tyler's smile faded slightly, and a cold laugh echoed in his mind, the Hyde's mocking tone filling his thoughts. I'll bet she will figure you out in the day, Tyler thought, trying to assert his will. You think so? The Hyde responded, his voice dripping with amusement. Tyler clenched his jaw, determined not to let the Hyde take full control. I know so. She's already begun to suspect Miss Thornhill before all of this. It won't be long before she ends up in prison. That's all right, the Hyde said with a dismissive chuckle. I prefer this one to that old hag anyway. Tyler's mind reeled as he glanced at Wednesday, who was sitting across from him at the counter, her arms crossed and her gaze fixed on him. She was observing him, but for reasons that had nothing to do with her usual dark curiosity. He could feel the tension building in the air. Then why are you helping Miss Thornhill? Tyler asked, confused. If you like this life so much, why follow her orders? Because she's the one who released me, the Hyde replied darkly. I'm subservient to whoever does so. Remember that. I've been waiting for you to get traumatized. As soon as you stepped foot in the Adams estate in Alaska, I knew it was only a matter of time before I took over. I made a great impression on her family, Tyler retorted defensively, though part of him questioned if that had truly been the case. Oh, please, the Hyde sneered. Your hunting skills were a joke. Wednesday caught a moose, you caught a small deer. I would have bathed in their blood as a gift, not stumbled around like a scared little boy. Tyler's stomach twisted at the thought, but the Hyde's words seemed to taunt him, pushing his emotions to the edge. Tyler. Wednesday's voice broke through his spiraling thoughts, and he snapped out of his trance, meeting her gaze. Sorry, Tyler muttered, trying to regain control of himself. I have to work the late shift today. You mind sticking around for a while? But the Hyde wasn't done. Where are you staying for the time being? He asked, his voice dripping with mockery. Wednesday raised an eyebrow, but answered truthfully. That's on a need-to-know basis, she said, her lips barely moving as she looked straight at him. The Hyde chuckled darkly. You don't trust me? He asked with a smile. No, I don't, Wednesday replied bluntly. Tyler winced, feeling the weight of her words. Told you she'd caught on, he said to the Hyde. The Hyde, however, wasn't perturbed. The old man's been late getting home the last couple of nights. You wanna come over? I'll prove to you that I'm not lying about the necklace. His eyes gleamed with a strange, calculating light. Wednesday, sharp as ever, had already picked up on the subtle shift in Tyler's speech, his vocabulary, the tone of his voice. She narrowed her eyes, a flicker of realization passing through her. But she remained calm. We'll see, she said, standing up and brushing past him. I'll think about it. As she walked out of the cafe, the Hyde smirked to himself. She's definitely coming by tonight, he said, speaking directly to Tyler's mind. Tyler gritted his teeth, trying to block out the Hyde's triumphant laughter. I can't let this happen, he thought desperately. I need to keep control. But as the door shut behind Wednesday, he knew it was already too late. Tyler's thoughts swirled in a dizzying spiral as the Hyde's voice echoed in his mind, teasing and taunting him. His body moved on its own accord, following the pull of the darker side, but part of him was still clinging to a shred of control, fighting it with every ounce of his will. You know she's going to ask to see that necklace first thing, right? Tyler taunted the Hyde. The Hyde's response was almost immediate, and filled with smug satisfaction. Well then, it's a good thing you lied about the late shift. Thanks for that, Tyler. A bitter laugh bubbled up from within Tyler's chest. He didn't want to admit it, but the Hyde was right. He had lied. And now, he was committed to whatever twisted game the Hyde wanted to play. They walked out of the cave, the tension between them thickening with every step. See? Told you we'd find it. Now, let's go, the Hyde prodded. We still have to go to the pharmacy. Tyler's heart raced. The pharmacy? What for? The Hyde's voice was dripping with amusement. To get protection, obviously. Tyler's stomach dropped. What are you talking about? The Hyde laughed darkly. What do you think I'm talking about? Obviously, we want to be safe for our first time. Couldn't you tell that our girl has been grabbing our clothes instead of our hair during our kissing sessions? Besides, her parents won't mind, as long as we're safe. Tyler wanted to scream, but his mouth was dry. His mind screamed in protest. This is insane, he thought. But no matter how hard he tried to hold on, the Hyde's grip was tightening around him. Before he could even process what was happening, Tyler's phone rang, snapping him out of his thoughts. He looked down at the caller ID and saw Miss Thornhill's name. His jaw clenched, knowing what would come next. Tyler, we have a job to do, Miss Thornhill's voice came through the speaker, cool and unbothered. There's a non-specific person I need you to eliminate. Quickly. No one can know about this. Tyler's response was immediate, a firm and unwavering no. But the Hyde couldn't help but smirk. Yes, master. But I have to make it quick. Wednesday Addams is here, and Tyler seems to be gaining more control every time he sees her. Miss Thornhill's voice dropped into a lower register. Keep him suppressed, and get rid of Wednesday Addams as soon as you can. The line went dead with a click. Tyler's hand trembled as he ended the call, a sinking feeling deep in his gut. The Hyde wasn't even fazed by the orders. Looks like you're going to have to wait to eat up Wednesday another time, Tyler said dryly. The Hyde sneered in his mind. Oh, please. There's still hours before 8 o'clock. In fact, I bet you that the scent of blood might even turn her on. The Hyde's laugh echoed through his mind, wild and maniacal, and Tyler had to fight the urge to cringe. They quickly cleaned up, got dressed, and headed to the pharmacy. Tyler couldn't help but feel the weight of each second that ticked by, each one drawing them closer to whatever twisted fate was waiting. As they pulled into the driveway, Tyler spotted her, Wednesday. She was climbing the side of the house like it was the most natural thing in the world. A cold smile tugged at the Hyde's lips. Perfect. Tyler didn't move as he watched her ascend, the creeping feeling of inevitability pressing in on him. They hurried up the stairs and into his room, the door creaking open just enough for Tyler to peer through. He saw Wednesday, her sharp eyes scanning the room for anything out of place, and Thing, the disembodied, sentient hand, crawling across the floor in search of the necklace. Tyler felt the Hyde take over entirely as he pushed the door open. "Is this what you were looking for, cockroach?" The voice was dripping with mockery, and Tyler could feel the Hyde's sadistic pleasure as he presented the necklace, dangling it just in front of her. Wednesday didn't flinch, her gaze intense as it flicked to the necklace. But she didn't say anything immediately, merely studying it with the careful precision only she could manage. Tyler felt himself drawn closer to her, now only an inch away as he stood tall, towering over her. "I took it to a jeweler," the Hyde continued, with an unsettling calm, "to see if the chain could be fixed. I can do it later though." His eyes never left hers. His voice had an almost sweet quality, but there was nothing innocent about it. Wednesday's gaze lingered on the necklace for a long beat, but Tyler could feel her mind working, analyzing every little detail. There was no doubt that she was suspicious, that she could see something was off. Thing, sensing the tension, scurried into a corner of the room, clearly aware that this was no ordinary moment. Tyler could feel it too, the air was thick, charged with something far darker than the usual unease that followed him. Wednesday's presence wasn't just an interrogation, it was a confrontation. Her voice broke the silence. "Why didn't you tell me about this sooner?" Her tone was cold, and it sent a shiver down Tyler's spine. She wasn't fooled by the lies. He could see it in her eyes, she knew. But the Hyde's grip on him was stronger now, and he leaned down just enough to catch her gaze directly, his breath brushing against her ear. "I didn't think it was necessary." "You wanted the truth, didn't you?" The words were an invitation, a dangerous game, one that Tyler wasn't sure he had the strength to back out of anymore. The room hung in heavy silence, the air thick with the weight of unspoken truths. For the first time in what felt like ages, Tyler felt like he was standing on the edge of something. And as Wednesday stood there, unmoving, her eyes locked on his, he wasn't sure if he was falling or if he was already lost. Tyler's breath hitched as his hand inched closer to Wednesday's face, his fingers moving as if they had a mind of their own. But the moment his skin brushed against hers, a sharp, intoxicating scent filled the air, blood. It wasn't his, but it was unmistakable. A flicker of recognition flashed in Wednesday's eyes as she froze, her gaze shifting to his face, a cold realization crossing her mind. "Who is your master, Tyler?" she asked, her voice sharp, precise, but with a tinge of something more, something cold and dangerous. The Hyde's grin spread across Tyler's face, his voice low and dark. "I can't answer that, cockroach." His eyes locked onto hers as his face leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin, and Tyler's body seemed to react against his will, drawn in by the Hyde's pull. Wednesday didn't flinch, but she did not back down either. She met his gaze with unwavering intensity. "How many victims have you killed?" she asked bluntly, her tone a blend of cold curiosity and dark resolve. The Hyde's eyes flickered briefly in the dim light. "About 2, he said, as his thumb grazed her lips in a surprisingly tender motion. It felt like an intimate gesture, but there was nothing innocent about the way his touch lingered. Tyler's voice broke through the haze of the Hyde's presence, apologetic but weak. "I didn't mean to do it, Wednesday," he murmured, his eyes searching hers for any hint of forgiveness, but the truth was undeniable. He knew he couldn't escape what had happened, even if he wanted to. Wednesday's gaze softened for a fraction of a second, but the sharp gleam of suspicion still remained in her eyes. Her fingers reached up, brushing the sides of his face as she studied him, her mind piecing together the reality of what was happening. She leaned in closer, eyes narrowing with new understanding. "Tyler," she said softly, a whisper of realization in her voice. Her fingers brushed over his cheek as she held him there, feeling the subtle tension of his muscles under her touch. Then, her eyes widened. "You're the Hyde." In a flash, she pulled her hand back, her pulse quickening as she realized just how much of Tyler was slipping away. But before she could fully retreat, Tyler's grip tightened on her wrist, pulling her hand back toward his face, her fingers still brushing against the side of his face as his lips brushed over the tips of her fingers, slow and deliberate. Wednesday's breath caught in her throat as she instinctively tried to pull her hand free. But Tyler held it there, pressing her fingers gently against his lips. He looked at her with a smirk that was all the Hyde, but there was something raw beneath it, something fragile that lingered in his eyes. "Tell me, cockroach," the Hyde purred, his voice low and almost teasing, "which one do you like better, me or Tyler?" Wednesday's eyes narrowed, a glimmer of defiance flashing in them. She tilted her head slightly, assessing him, her gaze unwavering. "Let's see, shall we?" she said, the challenge in her voice clear. Before she could react, Tyler's lips pressed firmly against hers, capturing her in a kiss that was both intense and hesitant, as though he was testing the waters of his own emotions. It was full of conflict, a mingling of the Hyde's darker hunger and Tyler's soft regret, all wrapped up in a single moment. At first, Wednesday remained still, her hands unsure of whether to push him away or pull him closer. But as Tyler's kiss deepened, something shifted in her. She could feel his internal struggle, the battle for control, and in that fleeting moment, she understood just how torn he was. Her hands moved to his chest, not pushing him away but not quite pulling him closer either. But with a soft exhale, she let her lips soften against his, feeling the heat of the kiss consume them both, yet keeping it anchored in something much more complicated. The kiss was brief, but it held everything: questions, doubts, control, and surrender. As they finally pulled apart, their breaths shallow and hearts racing, the room fell into a heavy silence. Wednesday's eyes were half-lidded as she stared at him, her lips tingling from the kiss. "You're right about one thing, Tyler," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "this is far from over." Tyler's hand dropped from her face, his fingers trailing slowly down her arm as he took a step back, his mind still reeling from the moment, both the Hyde and himself unsure of what came next. But one thing was certain, they were no longer on the same path they had started on. They had crossed a line, and neither of them knew where it would lead. As the silence between them stretched, Tyler's mind still raced, caught between the pull of the Hyde and the tenderness of his own feelings toward Wednesday. But before he could process anything further, Wednesday took a step forward, her gaze intense and unwavering. Without a word, she reached for him, pulling him toward her again, her lips claiming his in another kiss, this one deeper, more insistent. It was as if the kiss was her way of grounding them both, as though she could pull Tyler from the edge of the Hyde's darkness, even if just for a moment. There was an unspoken understanding between them, an acceptance that they had both crossed a line, and neither of them seemed to have the will to turn back. Their movements became more urgent, more tangled, as though the room itself was pushing them towards something they both knew they couldn't take back. Tyler's hands roamed over her body, his touch filled with a mixture of desperation and tenderness, as though he couldn't decide whether to hold on to her or to push her away. Wednesday, however, seemed to know exactly what she wanted, her hands pulling him closer, never giving him the chance to retreat. The world outside the room seemed to vanish as they lost themselves in the moment. There were no more words, only the quiet sounds of their breaths mingling, the soft press of skin against skin. Tyler wasn't sure when exactly it happened, when the Hyde and himself had fused into something else, but he knew they were both in it now, completely. When the moment finally slowed, both of them breathing heavily, they lay there together, tangled in the sheets. Wednesday's head rested on Tyler's chest, her fingers tracing small circles against his skin. He could feel the steady beat of her heart against his, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he was at peace. The Hyde's presence lingered, satisfied, quiet in the background. But Tyler wasn't focused on it. Not right now. He could feel the warmth of Wednesday beside him, the weight of their shared intimacy, settling around them like a protective cocoon. For once, Tyler felt like he wasn't lost, like he wasn't fighting for control. It was just the two of them in this strange, fragile space. That was until a loud bang echoed through the house, followed by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Tyler's heart skipped a beat as the door to his room swung open abruptly, and there stood Sheriff Galvin, his father, staring at the two of them in stunned silence. The air in the room froze. Tyler's face flushed with shock, a rush of panic rising in his chest. He quickly pulled the covers up to shield himself and Wednesday, his body tense with the sudden intrusion. His father's eyes flicked between the two of them, his expression unreadable, but the disappointment that lingered in his gaze was unmistakable. For a moment, there was no sound except the quick, shallow breaths filling the room. Tyler felt trapped, caught between the weight of his actions and the reality of the moment. He wasn't sure what to say, how to explain, or even if there was anything left to explain. But Sheriff Galvin didn't say a word. He just stood there, his eyes locked on Tyler's with an intensity that made the room feel smaller. Finally, Sheriff Galvin spoke, his voice cold but controlled. "No, what I'm not even gonna." Tyler opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. The guilt was suffocating, but so was the sense of defiance that followed it. His father's presence felt like a weight bearing down on him, but he couldn't quite summon the will to care. Wednesday, ever the composed one, sat up, her gaze unwavering, meeting Sheriff Galvin's eyes with a cold intensity of her own. There was no hesitation in her voice when she spoke, her words carrying a finality that seemed to pierce through the tension. "How about knocking next time, Sheriff?" she said, her voice calm, but there was something in her tone that made it clear she wasn't afraid of the confrontation. Sheriff Galvin didn't flinch at her words, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, perhaps surprise, perhaps something else, that made Tyler's chest tighten. He had never seen his father like this. Always the lawman, always the figure of authority. The morning sun rose over Jericho, casting long shadows over the streets as Wednesday moved through Tyler's house, the weight of the previous night's events hanging heavy in the air. Her steps were deliberate, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts she refused to entertain too long. The kiss, the touch, the connection, it was all still there, like an electric pulse that buzzed under her skin. But there was anger too, anger that had been simmering beneath the surface, rising with every passing second. She moved quickly, not sparing another glance at the room where Tyler had fallen asleep, the dark whispers of the Hyde still clinging to him. As much as she wanted to stay, to unravel what had just happened, she knew she couldn't. Not yet. Not while there were questions she still didn't have answers to. She grabbed her jacket from the hook by the door, her fingers stiff as she pulled it on. The weight of the necklace around her neck reminded her of the spell she'd cast on Tyler. The same spell that now seemed to be having unintended consequences. The Hyde was unlocked. Her jaw clenched as she took a final look around the room, her gaze sharp, calculated. There was no time to waste. Tyler was slipping, but she was not going to let him go down that path without a fight. Wednesday left for New Jersey right away after having breakfast with Tyler. Inside the 1950 Cadillac hearse, Wednesday's fingers drummed against the steering wheel as she drove, the rhythmic sound filling the space. The road blurred beneath her, but her thoughts were sharp and focused. There was no time to waste, not when she had so many unanswered questions. Her eyes flickered to the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of her reflection, cool, composed, but underneath that surface, there was a storm brewing. She had to be rational. The game had changed. The Hyde wasn't just a monster in Tyler's mind anymore. It was a reality, and Wednesday couldn't just play detective anymore. She needed answers. Her phone buzzed in the passenger seat. She reached for it, a single glance confirming the caller, Adele. The witch in Washington, who knew more than she let on. With a steady hand, Wednesday answered the call. "Adele," she said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of urgency. "I need to talk to you." There was a pause on the other end, then Adele's voice came through, sharp and attentive. "Wednesday, what is it? You sound strained." "Because I am," Wednesday replied, her grip tightening on the wheel. "Tyler's Hyde has been unlocked. I don't know how, but I felt it. He's different. More powerful. More in control. And it's not just him anymore. It's like, something else is influencing him." Adele's voice went still for a moment, a slight crack in her usual calm. "So the spell you put on the necklace, it's working?" "Yes," Wednesday confirmed, her tone firm. It's responsive to me. But Tyler isn't the one pulling the strings anymore. It's the Hyde. And I think someone else is pulling the strings behind all of this. Adele's breath caught on the other end, just enough to signal her concern. What do you mean? I think it's Miss Thornhill, Wednesday continued, her suspicion running deep. I don't have concrete proof yet, but it feels like she's at the center of this. Everything points to her. You have proof? Adele asked. No, I tried to get it out of him, but his mouth is sealed shut, Wednesday replied, her voice steady but tinged with a quiet fury. But Tyler, he's slipping. The Hyde, it's like he's under someone's command. And I know Miss Thornhill is hiding something. She's playing a game with him, and I'm not sure how, but I intend to find out. Adele was silent for a long moment, before speaking again, her voice heavy with thought. I'll see what I can dig up on her here in Washington. But Wednesday, be careful. If the Hyde is responding to you, then there's a chance you're the only one who can stop this before it's too late. Wednesday said, her voice sharp. I'm not trying to control him. But I'm not going to sit back and watch him fall apart either. He deserves better than this. And I won't let Miss Thornhill, she cut herself off, her eyes hardening as her grip tightened on the wheel. I won't let her win. I trust you, Wednesday, Adele said softly. Keep me updated. If you need anything, don't hesitate to call. With a final, tense sigh, Wednesday ended the call and placed the phone back in the passenger seat. The air in the car was thick with the weight of what had just been said, and Wednesday's mind spun with the knowledge that she was running out of time. There were too many pieces of this puzzle still scattered, and she couldn't make sense of it all without knowing who was playing what role. Her eyes flickered to the road ahead. Tyler was just the beginning. But Miss Thornhill? She had more to answer for. And Wednesday was prepared to make her do just that. As the hearse roared down the road, its dark silhouette cutting through the fading light, Wednesday felt the pulse of something dangerous in the air. She wasn't just searching for answers anymore, she was hunting. And no one, not even Miss Thornhill, was going to stop her. Like, comment, and subscribe to be notified for updates on this series.